Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Good morning to everybody. Thanks for joining again. Good to see a lot of folks in the audience rolling in. Um, so today we are back. I know we had a lot of folks come in yesterday, so we are have a lot of repeat offenders today. So good to see everybody. Today we're back with Transform Your Cloud Strategy with VMware Cloud Foundation with Rick Walsworth and Sabina Anja. Coming up next week, we're going to be back with our LinkedIn Live sessions with VCF Workload Mobility with HCX with Gabe Rosas on 710. A week from then, we're bringing back the learning sessions. I know we've had a lot of questions about what's going on with learning, so we're going to have What's New with VCF Learning with Denise Partelot on Wednesday the 17th. And just a gentle reminder, if you've not yet already, registration is open for Las Vegas for VMware Explore. That's coming up August 26th through 29th. And we just opened registration for Barcelona. So for those of you who are in EMEA or would like to go to EMEA, I know I sure do, registration is also open for Explore Barcelona. So check that out. But that's not why we're here today. We are here today because we've got Rick and Sabina with us. Why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves and tell us about what we've got going on today?
Hi, I'm Rick Walsworth. Sorry the cameras aren't working right now, but Director of Product Marketing as part of the VCF division. I've been at VMware now 5 years and really glad to see some of the changes that are coming and look forward to speaking with you here. Sabina?
Hi, I'm Sabina Anja. I work for Rick here, and we're going to walk you through the VMware Cloud Foundation, sort of transforming your business, what's new, and a bunch of other interesting facts about just Cloud Foundation in general. This was a fantastic start. Rick, take it away.
All right. So why don't you go ahead and jump to the next slide, and we'll jump right into it. I know top of mind for a lot of you, certainly through the last 7 months. I think it would be an understatement to call it chaotic, disruptive. But as we start to now execute in our full second quarter with VMware by Broadcom, these are kind of some of the things that we are expecting and continue to see as we execute out across this. Is that bringing together essentially some of the infrastructure software leadership, the technical innovation, and certainly our partner ecosystem was a big part of what we're doing. And we are doubling down on that. As a matter of fact, if you look at what we're doing here, this is absolutely working with much more focus around that. And that's focus is kind of a key theme, and that's been driven home in terms of building out our operating plan and really starting to execute against that plan. But more importantly, what we are seeing, and we're going to show evidence of this as we go through this presentation, is Hock Tan, the CEO of Broadcom, publicly stated he's going to put $2 billion worth of investment in R&D into VMware Cloud Foundation. And what we've seen, joined with the execution and the focus, this has absolutely brought forward a lot more execution on our roadmap, and we're really starting to bring some of that innovation out. And as we go through some of the details on our coming release, you're actually going to see evidence of how we're leveraging that investment going forward. Okay, next slide. So when the acquisition was first announced back in 2022, what Hock Tan did was he actually went out and met with hundreds of VCF customers. And out across that, a couple key themes kept coming back as part of it. Focus really on fewer things, right? So focus on private and hybrid cloud because it really is our core competence. It's our DNA. And bringing that DNA forward with the investment that I talked about really helps us address kind of the second area, which is really delivering the right infrastructure for the correct apps in the environments themselves. So really focus on what is that developer experience? How do we make sure that we are providing infrastructure that addresses the needs, not only of the infrastructure teams, but also the lines of business, of the app owners, on the dev teams, on the data science teams that are now starting to bring AI into the mainstream within their environments. How do we build infrastructure that really supports those broader environments? And finally, deliver infrastructure that is secure and resilient. And so as we go through some of the feature capabilities in the VCF 5.2 release that was announced recently, you are going to see a lot of focus around building more resilient systems and building systems that are much more secure in terms of bolstering the capabilities that we've already built upon over the last several years. Right, next slide. And certainly as we look at kind of the VCF division, right, and being part of the VCF team now for over 5 years as part of this is great validation, because this is really taking that concept of building infrastructure, leveraging best of breed technologies, vSphere, vSAN, NSX, ARIA, bringing those together, and rather than creating a bundle or a solution, creating an actual product, right? A product that allows us to be able to focus on delivering that cloud operating model, allowing customers to be able to deploy it on-prem as part of a private cloud deployment, but then extending that out into our service providers, our sovereign cloud providers, our hyperscale partners as part of that, as well as being able to go out to the telco and edge and delivering consistent infrastructure that focuses on really 4 key areas. Being ubiquitous, right? Trying to support any applications, whether they're based on VMs or containers, at scale, compatible, right? You have to be able to integrate with existing infrastructure and be able to make sure that the workloads are consistent and run out across those with very predictable performance, predictable outcomes, so that you can focus on planning business outcomes rather than focus on managing infrastructure. Fully integrated, right? So we're leveraging all the integration that we've built over 25 years, leveraging vSphere, but now extending that out into this full stack environment. And then, as I mentioned before, the ability to deliver infrastructure that is resilient, providing multiple layers of infrastructure resilience to be able to make sure that applications are running regardless of the issues that are drawn up there. Okay, next slide. And I believe this is my last one here. And so if you look at how this builds out and what that faster time to value looks like, it's really the ability to be able to take what was a very distributed engineering team, a very distributed product management team, a very distributed go-to-market team, and really now unify all those under a single leader, a single engineering team, and a single go-to-market team. And what that helps us do is it really helps deliver not only a unified experience for the customers as they come in, but also allows us now the ability to be able to deliver a unified product experience. And VCF 5.2 is actually great evidence of that coming together. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. We also are trying to simplify the way we do business, right? And so a lot of that had to do with a lot of the partnerships that we had built over time, and it was just very confusing. We had 168 different products and additions. We had over 8,000 SKUs within our price list, which was just crazy. We've brought that down to 2 foundational offers: VMware vSphere Foundation and VMware Cloud Foundation, which will be the focus of our discussion today. Also, faster customer success. Really try to accelerate time to value and focus on the ability for customers to be able to not only take and deploy this technology, but start to consume it. Because when you start to consume the technology, you will start to achieve and get to value much, much faster. Okay, next slide. And so we realized that through the chaos and through the disruption that's happened with the acquisition, modernization itself really brings forward an opportunity to be able to look at, okay, what am I doing now and how do I go forward? And we realized that a number of organizations are looking at alternatives to their existing vSphere infrastructure, right? It's just a natural reaction to what's happening here. But as we do this, you want to take a very hard look at what those options are and make sure that you're doing the best thing for your organization going forward. Right. And so if you look at kind of option on the left, which is really staying with traditional 3-tier infrastructure. Yeah, you may still have vSphere. You may be looking for another hypervisor as part of it. But you have to consider the cost of essentially moving away from the vSphere infrastructure, because it is very sticky. We realize that a lot of people have built their careers around learning how to be a VI admin, learning about vCenter, and learning about VMware Cloud Foundation, the full stack. But if you're only adopting a hypervisor and you're not bringing in storage and networking and security as a part of that overall infrastructure play, it becomes very difficult to scale. And this is the problem, unfortunately, that a lot of customers have learned the hard way, is that these silos really not only bring a very difficult model in terms of deploying infrastructure at scale, but as you start to bring more applications, more workloads, more use cases into that infrastructure, it tends to fall over, and it's not a good model. So the other option, which I'm kind of highlighting on the right, is go all in on public cloud, right? A lot of people saw this as the easy button, right? Just go ahead, I'll bite the bullet, I'll refactor my applications, and I'll start running them in native public cloud. And that in itself, that move is obviously very time consuming and expensive, but what most customers learn as they start to put more workloads on public cloud is it gets rather expensive. Matter of fact, there's studies out there that show that 40% of CIOs are spending more than they had allocated for within their public cloud budget. So it's just the lack of control of that. And then obviously there's always concerns about data sovereignty, data privacy and whatnot. But if you look at the public cloud model, what the hyperscalers got right was building an architecture that does provide the ability to scale. It's a unified infrastructure layer. So I now take compute, networking, storage, security. I now build that into a unified infrastructure layer. They've also mapped an automation and orchestration layer that allows those components to work very nicely together in a very agile, flexible, very compliant infrastructure solution that allows you now to be able to essentially orchestrate that so I can deliver infrastructure as a service so that my users, whether they be lines of business, whether they be developers, app teams, DevOps, data scientists, so that they can go in and self-serve. So it's that cloud experience that becomes very important. So the hyperscalers certainly got the architecture right, but a lot of times the expense and cost of migrating and refactoring applications becomes very exorbitant. And then once you do that, then they lock you in. And now you become essentially very dependent upon those monthly or quarterly bills from the hyperscalers that keep growing as I add more applications onto it. So the model right now is really difficult to be able to justify as you go forward. Okay, next slide. And the reason I bring up architecture is because architecture is very important to everything we do. Because if you look at how we've built VMware Cloud Foundation from the beginning, it really kind of centers around that core infrastructure stack, vSphere, vSAN or vVols, and then NSX from the networking standpoint, all tied together with very tight security and automation and orchestration layer that takes and makes all of these components work together. And then an IaaS consumption service, we call it the cloud consumption interface, that allows now users, whether they be, again, app owners, DevOps teams, or data scientists, they can go in, they don't need to know squat about the underlying infrastructure. Matter of fact, from their standpoint, infrastructure should be invisible, just like it is in cloud, right? I go to cloud, I go to my favorite hyperscaler, I swipe my credit card, I essentially have infrastructure that's delivered as a service in a complete self-service model. And that model is something we have doubled down on the VCF side, and we'll talk as we go through the details of the release, we'll talk about how we're doing this to really achieve 3 core outcomes for our customers. The first one is really to modernize infrastructure, to take that approach of making everything software defined, compute, storage, networking, management, security, everything is in a software defined infrastructure running on standard x86 hardware, but allowing you now to leverage the automation and orchestration to be able to deliver more applications in the infrastructure faster than you ever could before. The second area is really around delivering that cloud experience, right? It's the ability for the users, the consumers of the infrastructure, to be able to essentially go into an interface, provide access to self-service so that now they can start to consume infrastructure on demand without ever having to open a ticket, without ever having to request services. They have entitlements, and they're working with those entitlements as a way to be able to deliver that infrastructure at scale. So that cloud experience becomes very important, and you do want that cloud experience to look just like what I get when I go to a hyperscaler. but the ability to deliver that on-prem or extend that to the edge or any of our supported cloud endpoints as we deploy this out in a hybrid cloud environment. And then finally, security and resilience. And you're going to see these themes repeated as we start talking about this, because around security and resilience, there's no way that you can make compromises out around that. So ensure that you are protected against any of the latest cyber threats, and ensure that the system itself is resilient against a number of failures. Whether those failures be man-made in terms of a cyber attack or ransomware attack, you not only want to be able to have a very efficient, very robust protection mechanism, but in the unlikely event that something gets through, you also want to be able to make sure that you've got recovery mechanisms built in against ransomware, cyber threats, or any type of failures that happen within the environment. These are all important aspects, and they're kind of foundational to what we do going forward. Okay, next slide. So when we look at VMware Cloud Foundation, it's really it is a full stack. And one of the things that we've done is we really try to, as I mentioned, the ability to simplify down to 2 foundational offers. We used to have all different editions where you can pick any flavor, color, you can mix and match and be able to bring that together. But what that introduces complexity. And so the strategy behind essentially delivering a full stack infrastructure that not only provides complete lifecycle management so that I automate all the operations from my day 0 stand-up of initial infrastructure, my day 1 of provisioning of resources of that infrastructure into applications, and then my day 2 maintenance and lifecycle management. These are all automated capabilities that's built into it. Again, giving users and admins the ability to focus on delivering net new services rather than focusing on managing infrastructure. On the compute side, enterprise workload platform is, based on vSphere and that entire ecosystem that we've built around that. And it really is our core fundamental building block, and realize it's also where a lot of our customers have started, right? They started with compute. Then they started to move to storage, whether it be supported storage through vVols, virtual volumes, that allow us the ability to support third-party storage in this environment, but treat it as part of the ecosystem. Or if you're using vSAN, in either of those models, you are getting essentially that storage policy-based management that gives you the complete ecosystem to be able to deliver storage at scale in these environments. Networking, obviously, NSX has been a pioneer in software-defined networking, but what we'll do, and as we go through the details of this next release, we are providing options, right? Because we realize that many customers have built upon VLANs, leveraging vSphere VLAN back networks as a way to be able to do that. So we are now providing more flexibility, not only in terms of how you can define your networking infrastructure, but how it integrates more seamlessly into everything that's deployed, in your infrastructure today. Kubernetes. So we actually have an embedded conformant Kubernetes runtime called Tanzu Kubernetes Grid that is part of every VCF and every vSphere deployment that's out there. So from day 0, when you're deploying VCF or vSphere, you actually have the ability to be able to run VMs and containers as first-class citizens in this environment. Matter of fact, we've leveraged a lot of the Kubernetes framework in terms of how we've structured this, in terms of building out namespaces so that developers have, kind of friendly, well-defined spaces that they can work in. And as long as they're operating within that namespace, all of the security, all the storage quotas, all of the compute power, all of the GPUs that are assigned to those workloads, those are part of the entitlements that are included within that Kubernetes environment. So it does provide a complete ecosystem, which can obviously be enhanced by adding in some of the management. So if you look at the Tanzu platform in terms of enhancing that, that's an add-on that you can bring in to be able to provide a complete developer ecosystem out of the box as part of it. And then finally, automation and operations, right? So I mentioned a lot of automations we're doing at the infrastructure level, but we're also providing a very consistent framework for delivering automation at scale so that as I go in as a user, I can essentially go into a interface, either via APIs or leveraging declarative syntax, and I can go start to build infrastructure as code. that interface now provides a portal in which consumers can now start to utilize the technology. They can run it through their sprint. If they complete their sprint, they're done with the resources, they can now put those resources back into the pool so it can be utilized by somebody else. So this fungible architecture does provide the flexibility and the scale to be able to allow customers to be able to scale at ease. Okay, next slide, please. And so what this leads us to is really leads us into VMware Cloud Foundation 5.2. And this is actually going to be the focus for the rest of this discussion. And Sabina is actually going to walk us through the details of our 5.2 release. But just from a high level overview, I'll provide this just to be able to set some context and allow Sabina to be able to walk through some of the more detailed capabilities within it. So the first thing, and again, I'll also reference some of the proof points that I mentioned before about the focus and the execution and how we're leveraging the additional investment that Broadcom is putting into VMware as part of the VCF division. I'll focus on some of those points and how we've been able to bring some of these items through. And the first proof point here is the VCF import function. Anyone that's been around VMware or been around VCF for any time, this is probably familiar to you as Brownfield import. Horrible name, but great functionality. And what this does is this allows existing vSphere and vSAN users to be able to take their existing running production clusters that are running HCI, compute plus storage, and be able to import those into a VCF environment. So now I've got complete fleet management of that entire environment. Now this functionality, it's hard to do. All right. First off, let's just kind of realize that this is a very difficult problem to solve for. And as a result, it was always on the roadmap, but always kind of kept getting pushed out to the right, pushed out a couple quarters, pushed out. But because of the focus and because of the prioritization that was put on this, we've been able to essentially accelerate this and deliver this in as part of our coming 5.2 release. And Sabina will walk you through the details on that. The other part on the infrastructure side is Edge. As I mentioned before, Edge is a big part of our strategy. We are absolutely seeing much more demand to be able to push functionality more out to the edge. And the use cases here are varied, right? It could be something like just traditional retail where I want the ability to go from a primary data center out to a number of remote sites. We are absolutely seeing that. Remote office, branch office. But what's interesting is we are starting to see a lot more drivers that require having more infrastructure, more compute power out at those edge locations. And the strategy is, look, let's try to put as much horsepower as close to the data source as possible so that, when you start thinking about private AI, when you start thinking about generative AI or large language models, it does require processing large amounts of data. Now, if I'm doing that at an edge site, but I have to transport that data across a wide area network, it's going to introduce latency. It's going to introduce, essentially things that are going to slow down the outcomes. So by putting the compute power out at those edge sites, I can now start to run AI workloads out at the edge site, filter the data down, and then deliver the results back to the primary data center. So we're starting to see a lot more of these models be deployed as people are looking at how to use generative AI as a competitive differentiator in their own business. On the developer side, this cloud experience area, one of the things that has been a frequent request within our advisory boards, our customer advisory boards, is the ability to be able to run a independent TKG service. And just for context, so you understand, currently, before 5.2, if indeed I wanted to move to the next version, the next upstream compliant version of Kubernetes, I essentially had to wait for the next vCenter or the next VCF build. So it could be months before I have access to that latest service. What we're doing with this release is we're completely separating those capabilities so that now I can go anytime to the CNCF, to be able to download the latest Kubernetes and now run that. So I could shave months off of getting access to new features that are delivered through the open source CNCF committee as a way to be able to deliver new functionality and, again, make my developers happy because they can be working with the latest versions of code that are available out there. Something we never did before. This is, again, great innovation. And Sabina's going to walk through this in a little more detail, but we're also providing choices, as I mentioned before, in terms of virtual networks. I can use, traditional vSphere VLAN-backed networks, or I can use NSX and take advantage of all of the software-defined networking that's built in there. We're no longer forcing that upon customers. They now have options, which allows you, in these environments to be able to gracefully import systems in under VCF control. And then at that point, you can essentially adopt the virtual networking of your choice. On the security and resilience side, live patching has been one of our most requested features, through our CTABs and through the customer functions that we serve, and provides the ability to, do live patches to systems that are in production. So I don't have to take a system down. If I've got a critical security patch I have to apply, I no longer have to take those systems down. I can actually patch running operational production systems without having to evacuate the host or without having to put hosts in maintenance mode. I can now do this with a live system. And in a VCF environment, we're providing flexible upgrades, and we're bringing functionality that was typically driven by an external tool we call the async patch tool. We're now delivering that functionality so I can actually patch operational VCF systems with little or no downtime as part of that. And again, we're going to double down. You're going to see more investment in terms of making operational day two functionality much more seamless within a VCF environment. And then finally, we introduced support for DPUs. Many of you may remember this as Project Monterey. But in our initial release for 5.1, we only supported single instance DPUs. We did not support dual DPUs for either redundancy, where I wanted an active failover or active passive failover path, or for the ability to essentially support both paths. So I can now support those out there. We are supporting dual DPUs in this release as part of our standard operations. So this provides an overview of those capabilities. Next slide, please. It's a little slow. There it goes. We're loading. And so if you look at 5.2, here are some of the outcomes you can expect. And as Sabina walks through the details on this, we'll actually provide a lot more detail, a lot more context. But what you can expect to see is certainly improved resource utilization by streamlining a lot of the kind of complexity, taking the complexity out of the equation and really making it a lot easier. So as I mentioned, you can focus more on delivering business outcomes and focus on managing infrastructure. Enhanced developer speed. So a lot of the things that we've built into the product in terms of the dashboards and the cloud admin consoles, these do provide the ability to be able to help developers help themselves in a self-service manner, to be able to help make sure that we're delivering infrastructure at scale, and to be able to make sure that we are also delivering infrastructure that is resilient in terms of the ability to overcome, traditional failures, which, may take systems down. So the ability to be resilient to avoid those types of outages, but also infrastructure that is completely secure by staying on top of the latest cyber threats that are out there, and certainly providing things like intrusion detection and network detection and response, which uses AI as a way to look for anomalies in systems that are, potential threats as part of that, and certainly doing a lot of that in conjunction with our partners on the application network security team, and leveraging the vDefend products as add-ons to be able to help bolster the built-in security out across there. At the end of the day, customers are going to see faster time to value because of the fact that we're essentially streamlining and simplifying a lot of these operations. You no longer have to spend a lot of time planning and architecting a lot of this. A lot of this functionality comes right out of the box and then gives you the ability to customize it to your exact use case that you're deploying as part of this. Okay, next slide. All right, so just building this out as we, look at kind of where the functionality and where some of these benefits play in, it's best to kind of map it into the day of a life of a admin, right? So day zero, what are you doing? You're typically standing up infrastructure. You're building out net new infrastructure as a way to be able to help support the business. By automating deployment of this infrastructure from a private cloud standpoint, you're going to see faster setups, quicker import of existing infrastructure, and better performance out of the gate from a day zero standpoint. Now, as we move to day one, and I think about provisioning infrastructure and how do I provide the scale needed as a way to do that, automation is where we're really trying to streamline many of these operations to not only improve performance, but then also as you start to migrate workloads onto the platform, leveraging a lot of the functionality we're delivering within this as a way to be able to do this at scale. And then, on the day two side, this is really about maintaining systems, right? What does it take to maintain systems? And a lot of times people focus on day zero, day one, but they really overlook what it takes to maintain these systems over time, especially these complex systems that have a lot of interdependencies out of part that. So obviously, lifecycle management has been a big part of what VCF delivers through SDDC Manager, but we've also taken that and now built that with a lot of reliability and security. So things like pre-checks, make sure that if your systems drift from a configuration standpoint over time, we will catch that up front. So it makes the upgrade experience a lot more seamless and a lot less interruptions as I'm doing that. Scalable management solutions, so the ability to leverage things like ARIA operations and ARIA automation to not only deliver a better experience, but also to be able to make sure that the day two operations happen seamlessly. And then as we look at automating everything, right? Ruthless automation is part of this. The automated operations does provide a lot of net new functionality that did not exist before. And I believe this is my last slide. We'll talk a little bit about some of the outcomes you can expect out of 5.2. So if you look at the VCF import, the ability to migrate vSphere and vSAN environments, prior to 5.2, this required a migration, right? So you essentially had to sign up for professional services. The PS team came in, took an inventory of your entire environment. They would essentially have to evacuate all the hosts. So you'd have to have enough swing capacity so I can move all the data, all the workloads off to alternate host. Then I would essentially have to rebuild my clusters under VCF control. Now within 60 minutes, you can take those same configurations that could have taken days with the PS engagement. I can now deliver this capability within 60 minutes. When I look at the virtual networking side, now we're talking about 60 seconds. I mean, these are instantaneous capabilities that allow you the ability to be able to say, look, I want to deploy either VLAN-based or NSX-based networks. This is something that is now part of the workflow that's built into it. And again, something that happens very, very quickly. And then when you think about live patching, within 48 hours, our commitment is within 48 hours, we can deliver patches to critical systems without having to take systems offline. And this is huge, especially in environments where downtime is not an option. This now gives us the ability to be able to do this within 48 hours. You can now deliver those systems at scale without having to take downtime as part of it. So again, I think in summary, there's a lot of capabilities. I know Sabina's going to double click on many of these, but I did just want to provide a little bit of context. I will at this point hand it off to Sabina and let her walk us through the rest of VCF 5.2.
Hey, tall order there after this very, very lovely introduction. A few notes on the key outcomes for for 5.2. The less than 48 hours. That's more relating to the SLA timeline that a lot of either your IT managers or if you're a security officer, if you're a security engineer, you'll know that there are these very, very fixed SLAs in which you have to fix the CVE. The 48 hours isn't the time it allows, the time we give you to put a new patch. The patch is literally, you can apply it as soon as it's available, but you will be able to fit it in that 48 hours. It's usually mandatory by either compliance, security issues, and so on, and security standards, and so on and so forth. But let's go a little bit deeper in what does it mean to modernize infrastructure with VCF 5.2. If you've joined this webinar today to basically hear more about how you transform your business, it's a great place to start when talking about modernization. Here's why. So as we look at a lot of these features, Rick touched a little bit on how VCF import, VCF edge sort of help customers drive. These are our key features. However, we do have a few more in our payload coming out as a result of 5.2. And these are available here. You see some items like vSAN Max and vSAN ESA Stretch Cluster. What's important to know about these, and probably part of it deserves the explanation around why we chose not to elevate these as our main features, partly because we've already released these in the past. This is technology you have seen from us before. And we wanted to make sure that it's part of the payload, but also that we elevate what is really like deeply coveted by our consumers, by our users, by the majority of the IT admins. And that's kind of how we ended up with VCF import and VCF edge as the driving or the main key features, and then all of these below. Now let's talk about a few more under this. We have something called offline depot, which some of you might have requested in the past, might have sent notes in the past about, which is essentially the ability to upgrade infrastructure through SDC Manager and not have to depend on an internet connection. So if you have an air-gapped environment, if you have anything along the lines of an intelligence infrastructure, to say it kindly, then this is for you. We support installations and updates in environments without internet connectivity. You want to look more into that, talk to your salesperson. It will be definitely the kind of features you want to have a deep dive on. Now, let's go a little bit through what vGPU enhancements means. Again, this is the kind of slide that talks a little bit about the value, but also skews a little bit technical. So some of these names might not be very obvious straight away, so I'm going to help you through it. vGPU enhancements, they introduce significant enhancements to how the virtual GPU management is being done. You get better resource optimization, better resource utilization, and you improve efficiency. Remember, GPUs are incredibly expensive. Being able to time slice, being able to better leverage GPUs is incredibly important, both from how you use the technology, but also making sure that you don't end up overspending on that part of your infrastructure. The updates that we bring here allow for different vGPU profile types and memory size to share the same physical GPU, provide detailed GPU resource usage metrics, and streamline distributed resource scheduler, basically something called DRS settings, for vGPU-enabled virtual machines. Isolated workload domains with shared networking. What's this all about? Again, this has been something that's been requested by customers quite a few times, and now you basically have the option to join the management domain SSO using something called an enhanced linked mode. I warned you this is the technical part of the presentation. Now, as a result of that, you can create an entirely isolated SSO domain. Obviously, through this isolated SSO domain, you can share networking instance or a dedicated instance. So you can kind of design and create exactly the way you want it. You can have your isolated box that includes shared networking, and you can create separate networking for it. It's more of those features that help you build the private cloud exactly the way you want it with the most amount of features. It's not something that necessarily gets elevated as a top feature. IPv6 support for NSX Manager, that's reasonably obvious on its own. The newest version of NSX, which is shipping with VCF 5.2, introduces this advancement that essentially supports IPv6 only, so not dual stack, but IPv6 only, NSX Manager, and Edge nodes. Now, all previous deployments required a dual stack. With this update, now you have the opportunity to drop your need for an IPv4 address. We know some of you are slowly running out of IPv4, in spite of the fact that we didn't think it would happen, and naturally, you can move straight to full IPv6. The Network Assessment and Optimization Report, much like the title suggests for this one. This is a new network assessment that features a comprehensive dashboard, and it offers you a PDF report that's tailored for pre-VCF and pre-NSX customers. This highlights both the benefits of VCF networking, and it allows for customers to see how deploying NSX enhances performance and reduces inefficiency. Now, that sentence doesn't say a lot on its own, so let me give you a little bit of insight into how that report plays out. You essentially get more visibility into your application traffic. So once you onboard this is a very much a day one, day two feature that you can use within the first 2 hours of having deployed VCF. Once you have workloads that start going through the network fabric that NSX creates, you can start gaining intelligence in this level of reporting. It's a free tap in your network, straight out of the box. The product team had definitely insisted to make sure that we mention it, that this is something that you can do straight away. The other nice thing with an assessment and optimization report like this is that you also get information about traffic and efficiencies. In a lot of infrastructure, a lot of traffic goes kind of in a lot of more ways than you'd expect. So I wouldn't go in that technical detail. But now you can also look at network isolation, different solutions and recommendations for how it should go. So it has a degree of intelligence in terms of, hey, is this how it's supposed to go? Is this the most efficient way to do things? That's about as much time I've ever spent talking about a reporting tool. Moving on. Let's look a little bit at the centralized license management, which is about as obvious as the title suggests. It allows you to kind of centralize all of your licenses for the different VCF components. That is definitely something that all of you have come at some point with a degree of, please fix this. That's literally what this feature does. On the enhanced image customization, let's take a moment with that one. For this, we remove every non-essential component from the ESXi image in order to reduce its size. Now, you can go ahead and optimize further for remote and edge use cases, and you can omit unnecessary vendor add-on components. You basically get a very, very lightweight image if that's what you look for. You have the ability to basically strip it. You don't have to, but you can. Now, a few HCX features under this enhanced image customization that help drive slightly better interaction with other environments, such as the public cloud, a different data center. Let's start with HCX assisted vMotion. This one just allows vMotion to be orchestrated from HCX at line rate speeds. This offers a unified dashboard for all of your mobility and your migration needs. Now, the integration enables true live migration with HCX networking capabilities. And then it goes ahead and it gives you this experience across every other type of migration as well. So customers will end up benefiting from better operational efficiency and simplicity. And you have a single pane of glass where you can follow with basically everything that's going on. Imagine again the simplicity of vMotion and the power of HCX behind it. That would be the nicer way to explain this quickly. The second HCX feature that we want to bring up is this twice the throughput for HCX private cloud migration. So in the past, you have about 600 VMs that you'd be able to migrate concurrently. Now you go up to 1,000 and something VMs that you can migrate concurrently. So this is both a performance and a scale enhancement that's mostly aiming to improve migration speed. Now, obviously the key benefits is larger scale, faster migration. It's just as simple as that. Now, if you look at the overall, I don't say bill of materials, but kind of these features that come out in the modernization track for 5.2, notice that they're all aimed at faster, better, more efficient. That's all we're trying to build for customers that are in the process or on the journey towards a private cloud. We want you to be able to take what's existing, vSphere, vSAN environments, bring them on board to VCF with as little friction as possible. And we're going to go through VCF import in a little bit more detail on the next slide, but just one more note on this modernization bit. We have better scalability at edge locations, more performance. Notice all of those HCX features, vSAN Max support, vSAN ESA stretch cluster, all of the goodness in one product.
Hey Sabina, I was just gonna suggest maybe it's a good time to do that poll that we had talked about right at this part before you go into the VCF import.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, Anders, you want to launch the poll?
Sorry, I'm triple muted here. Let's go ahead and get that going.
Okay, appreciate it.
No worries. Sorry for the lag on that. Alrighty, here we go. Have you deployed VMware Cloud Foundation in your environment? We'll give you about 30 seconds for that. Everybody get your answers in. And I've got a couple of questions here queued up if you guys want to field a quick question while we wait for the poll answers. Let's see. Will non-VCF clusters be supported for import if they are workload domains?
Well, it's almost so there are really two supported models when you look at the VCF import functionality. The first one is around vSphere and vSAN environments that are essentially just HCI, right? So I've just got standard HCI, and you want to bring those in under SDDC Manager. And Sabina's going to walk through the details on the next slide, so this is actually a good setup for her. But yeah, you can essentially bring those in. The second model is those customers that, let's say, bought the full stack, which I see right now there's about 18% of the audience that's there. Those customers have the ability to essentially, they have entitlements to SDDC Manager, but they didn't deploy it. So they can actually bring in those systems, and actually Sabina is going to walk through both of those models. So if you hold that question just for a little bit, I think we'll get a very detailed answer.
Awesome. And we do have a couple more questions in the queue, but we'll save those for Q&A here in a minute. If anybody does have any additional questions, please get them in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to those as quickly as possible. So looking at the poll here, yeah, answers are about as expected. Number one is we only have vSphere installed.
Yep.
Next, no deployed vSphere and vSAN. Yes, we have deployed the full stack, including SDDC Manager, 18%.
Yep.
No deployed vSphere, vSAN, NSX, ARIA, no SDD Manager, and then no deployed vSphere, vSAN, and NSX, just one person.
So. Okay, thanks for the poll. Appreciate that. Sabina, we'll hand it right back to you.
Great. We have 13 minutes to cover about 12 slides. Okay, we'll start with VCF import. I'm going to leave the customer benefits since they're kind of running through the camera now, and I'm just going to walk you through a few more details. So first of all, VCF import is available for all customers that have entitlements to the VMware Cloud Foundation SKU. This feature allows users to obviously import their existing vSphere or vSphere and vSAN environments, again, as per the poll, into Cloud Foundation. It allows for this centralized management. It allows you to leverage the full capabilities of SDDC Manager. Now, this is a phase one implementation of VCF import, which means there are certain limitations to it. What you need to know, what happens once it's imported, SDDC Manager will support all available operations of the imported environment. What is important to know here is that there are some pre-import caveats, meaning that your environment needs to fit, at the moment, a certain architecture. There's certain things that we do not take into the import. So once the environment has been imported, SDDC Manager will support all of those operations, but there are things that will not fit the import. So that's an important distinction I want to make. During the deployment of a workload domain, user will have the flexibility to choose among a standalone NSX deployment, a share NSX deployment, vSphere networking, or VCF networking, which will be deployed using kind of overlay virtual networking. You get governance and compliance as a result of it because it's part of the design. You don't need to rework. You don't need to redesign anything. We've actually done quite a few demos, and I've set up a quick lab on this that we could show to different customers. The flow is pretty easy. It allows you to take kind of an existing pre-configuration, especially the simpler the environment at this stage, the better it is. But what we're working on, and from a product perspective, is to be able to take on essentially, I don't want to say any variation, especially not in the context of a webinar, but a large set of variations of environment, and we're able to bring them into VCF. Now, some of the pre-import caveats that you should know, at the moment, if you're running VxRail, we don't support that. You have to have your cluster upgraded to a VCF 4.5 bill of materials. So think about vSphere 7 OU3 in order to avoid any sort of mixed functionality issues. We would like to not look at vSAN stretch cluster for the time being, and there's a bunch of other standard switches, mixed DVSs, certain external storage. Basically, if you have a more complex environment and you're using special things both in vSphere and vSAN, talk to your Core SE or your TAM or your PSO about what makes the most sense for you, because there's probably a solution regardless of kind of where you are right now. I'm not going to go through all of the pre-import caveats. We can have a special session of Brownfield import, VCF import as time goes by. I'm going to skip a little bit through Cloud Foundation Edge, unless, Rick, you think it's a good time to still chat about this now.
I think I covered enough of it in the intro. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory, but it just provides more scale, more functionality out across there.
All right. I'll move to cloud experience for developers. And much to Rick's point earlier on, what's important to know with cloud experience for developers is that we're not aiming to speak now to developer persona. We don't want necessarily to onboard a developer on VCF, but what we do want to do is create this infrastructure that better serves developers, that doesn't end up being spread out in 50 tickets across different parts of the infrastructure, waiting for that piece of networking to be provisioned, this piece of storage to be allocated. So look at what's coming in the payload for this part of Cloud Foundation 5.2. Look at it more as, how does it help me build a better environment for my developers? And how does it help me actually accelerate a lot of these outcomes a lot quicker? And what can we do kind of to make it frictionless and not have to constantly wait for deployments? Rick already covered independent TKG service and simplified adoption of virtual networking. And in case you're still wondering, like, what's simplified adoption of virtual networking have to do with developers? Well, you have to go back a little bit to, why is it important to have a consumable private cloud? Why have so many developers flocked to public cloud infrastructure? Largely because it was so much easier for them to get the resources that they need literally at the one click of a button or 5 clicks of the button in AWS or Azure or anywhere else, that that's the model they want to work at. I want my things now, and I don't want to hear why they don't work. Now let me come back to simplified adoption for a second. When you want to build a private cloud that's easy to consume, it's easier if everything is kind of in one platform. And we're not saying don't use any kind of other kind of networking. We're just saying that once you extend your overlay networking within VCF, you start leveraging NSX as a result, or VCF networking within VCF, it makes it a lot easier to do the automation orchestration part. So it becomes a lot easier to build that self-service catalog. It becomes a lot easier to tell Arya, hey, run all of these flows across my infrastructure, provision for me all of these services. Now, what makes it sometimes difficult, much like VCF import did before, is how do I move some of these important networks from just the gateway, the numbering literally, away from my existing network infrastructure and into VCF? And in the past, it was done by essentially doing a bunch of manual operations. And now we have this way of bringing it in with 5.2, which allows less than 60 seconds to change the gateway from your previous environment to the new one. This becomes obviously easier to automate, easier to orchestrate, and it's part of the same private cloud. So that's our reasoning for putting simplified adoption of virtual networking as part of a developer feature, as opposed to putting it in the modernized infrastructure. The rest of the feature, notice the top 3 ones. Cloud Admin Launchpad, Cloud Admin Dashboard, Cloud Consumption Interface. They're all about kind of interacting better with your environment. The Cloud Admin Launchpad, for example, is a feature designed to enhance the efficiency of cloud administrators. It helps you do initial setup processes, automating repetitive tasks. And basically what the administrator ends up doing is they can deliver resources to developers faster through this kind of self-service access. And the Cloud Admin Dashboard, because it sounds a little bit the same, but really isn't, this one is designed to provide cloud administrators a comprehensive, centralized view of their entire cloud infrastructure, have more visibility into your private cloud resources, have easier management tasks, understand sort of what's being consumed, when, and how. If you remember, I've mentioned some of this in the vGPU management. More visibility is always better. You have better dashboards. We've leveraged technology that we already had to basically start looking at how VCF is running and present it to you as the user. Now, the cloud consumption interface, and I realize I'm kind of glossing through this, the cloud consumption interface is an easier way for developers to have a customizable cloud experience. It's essentially designed to emulate the flexibility and ease of use that's usually found in public cloud environment. This interface allows administrators to just tailor their access and resources according to what the organization wants to put forward. And it helps with collaboration, helps with requesting different resources, and you can design role-based access. Like, okay, you want access to my environment, here's what you can request and how. And this is essentially what's allowed for the developer to see when they request. It's one step closer to that self-service catalog. Now, all of the other features that you see here, and I'll touch on 2 more. GPU summary for private AI. Again, private AI, big thing for pretty much the entire industry, for Broadcom, for Cloud Foundation for that matter. GPU summary for private AI is our integration of GPU monitoring within VCF operations, and it allows us to make sure that GPU accelerated workloads perform optimally. Again, these are incredibly expensive workloads, expensive hardware. Finding the most insight into them is incredibly important. Now, ESXi host pages and cluster host pages becomes part of the inclusion. We look at GPU temperature, we look at dedicated dashboards to make sure that we have a good GPU overview, and we have an inventory of all of the resources that are available, meaning that administrators can now look at kind of what's at peak performance, are we using it consistently across the board, and just have better efficiency across the AI and ML infrastructure. The last one I'm going to touch on is the self-service AVI automation for DevOps. Notice that it has sort of a purple dash there, so we have to mention that this requires an additional entitlement, and it's related to the AVI load balancer use. What you need to know here is we've essentially leveraged the capabilities of ARI automation in order to provide DevOps teams with self-service access to automated deployment of the AVI load balancer resource. So we're going back to building all of the necessary capabilities of a private cloud, load balancer included, straight out of the box. So you want to start automating this? Great. It's sort of part of the package given that additional entitlement. Overall, what does 5.2 bring to in terms of improving that cloud experience for developers? Well, you have that faster deployment time with Kubernetes management that Rick mentioned earlier. You can adopt resources better, whether it's through VCF import when you start building your private cloud as a modernized feature, or you just adopt existing networking or literally networks. You don't even have to move everything. You choose what you want, you bring it in your private cloud, you start automated, and then start providing it to your developers when they need it. And last but not least, obviously, a better view into the different resources, whether they're vGPUs, existing consumption, and so on and so forth. Now, in terms of security and resilience, and this is the last bit we're going to cover as part of this webinar, obviously, security and resilience is an incredibly important feature for important track for pretty much every business nowadays. Security budgets are consistently growing, and the reasons are obvious why. We have more attackers, infrastructure is so much bigger, so there are so many more places for different attackers to come in and ways in which they can take advantage of things, and we're insanely resilient on it. We very much depend on technology on a day-to-day basis. Once internet is not working on your phone in every possible way, you'll just know how sort of naked without technology you feel. But let's talk a little bit about what 5.2 does rather than the mobile phone, and go back to live patching and flexible upgrades. Rick covered that very well. We've tried to bring that flexibility in terms of you as the customer, you as the user, being able to bring the right patch at the right time within those SLAs that security architects really, really appreciate. The dual DPU support, more of a resilience feature than necessarily a security, but also something that allows for network performance to be a lot better. Again, if you're not familiar with DPUs, just think of them as incredibly smart network interfaces that allow you to do both offloading and higher level of processing. Two main features. What's under the line right now? Something called redundancy and load balancing at edge. Now, this feature in 5.2 essentially is a traffic management tool. If you're not a network guru, don't worry about it too much. But essentially, we didn't used to provide this level of redundancy at the edge. And now we've improved both performance and redundancy by essentially not limiting the user to a single VNI. The identity and federation support, the Entra ID. This is a feature in 5.2 that introduces Azure ID, also known as Entra ID, integration for a unified identity management access as throughout the VMware Cloud Foundation components. This enhancement will build upon the existing Okta Federation. It offers administrators a streamlined and secure way to manage user identities, obviously using single sign-on within the VCF environment. Again, very much requested, finally delivered, very happy customers as a result of this one. The few features that are in purple, once again, additional entitlement required. I'm going to cover a few of them now. The increased vDefend distributed and gateway scale, obviously a firewall feature. This comes with something called vDefend, which was previously known as NSX Security. NSX Security has well, again, name change to vDefend. vDefend 4.2 has released now at the same time as VCF 5.2. It works seamlessly with VCF. It's essentially an extension of NSX. In terms of a better security posture, vDefend is just a fantastic choice for VCF. Now, whether you choose to use it or not, here's what's new. This gateway scale feature, it enhances the scale of the firewall rules and security groupings by, again, leveraging the NSX kernel. This update offers a 3 to 5 times increase in both rule and group capacity, both for local and federated configurations. The other features, if we look at the SIEM integration for east-west ransomware protection, incredibly important, it links with SIEM tools like Splunk, for example. So the vDefend Advanced Threat Protection will enable better network security operations because it now allows for a better correlation with what you already collect as part of your local environment, and it can use private AI analytics. So when you link with Cloud Splunk or vRealize Log Insight, if you're making use of that product, you now have all of that information on-prem, and you're able to generate notifications for different network detection and campaigns in a JSON format to use, well, in your overall security strategy. Then last but not least, we have the AVI load balancer integration with SDC Manager, which about as obvious as that title sounds. It basically means that we took the load balancer into SDC Manager so you can lifecycle it from the main tool. If you're not familiar with SDC Manager, think about it as fleet management for the entirety of VCF. It's the tool you want to use to upgrade each and every single component as part of VCF, so you don't have to do the manual steps for each component. I think I'm going to close with that in terms of feature identification. I'm going to stop for a second on the security benefits. What can you get out of this? Continuous security. Less downtime as a result of live patching and upgrades. You have higher resilience with either better DPU support or just overall with the flexible upgrades. And last but not least, all of the items or all of the new features that come with vDefend just allow you to have better threat detection and better insight into what's going on from a security perspective. That being said, I think we're reasonably at time, so I'm going to put a few next steps here, have a deeper conversation. We know we've been pretty quick going through all of these features. It's a humongous payload and a lot to learn. Ask your account rep to talk about an EBC for an in-depth conversation. Read our VCF 5.2 blog and learn more about VCF on the web. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Do we have maybe 5 more minutes to field a couple more questions here?
We can try.
Sure, why not?
All right. Let's see. Let's start off with this one here. Let's see. Okay. It looks like a bunch of these did get answered. We're doing good. Okay. How about this one?
I did my best.
Yeah, you've done good. Does VMware Cloud Foundation have integration with NVIDIA GPUs?
Yeah. Well,
yes.
Private AI Foundation does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but I mean, just to take that a step further, I mean, since our 4.4 release back in early 2022, we've supported the NVIDIA AI Enterprise Suite. So it's kind of native integration. What that does is it provides the ability to virtualize GPUs so that now I can take a single GPU and I can essentially share it amongst a number of hosts, or I can take multiple GPUs and basically gang those GPUs together into a single large VM, which is certainly, as Sabina said, one of the use cases we are seeing around private AI.
Well, and not only that, but depending on which side of features you're looking at, do we have integration with NVIDIA? From the Private AI Foundation solution perspective, the whole idea there is to bring a lot of the features that build VCF as this private cloud and the way NVIDIA operates both their software stack and the way it interacts with the hardware environment, so with the GPUs. So all of this works together. AI ML workloads work by default on VCF, but what we bring through this marriage of the two brands, VMware and NVIDIA, is both better insight. Notice that a bunch of features today, and I'm just going to quickly, because I want to answer the question now. We have a bunch of things. The GPU summary for private AI, for example, is a great example of that level of both depth and insight into how is the GPU working. This obviously works with NVIDIA GPUs. If I go back here, some of the vGPU enhancements is exactly what Rick was bringing up now. It's, again, that time slicing, that fine detail into how is my GPU being used. That's all both in service of regular private AI, but you can also see it in presented to you in vSphere. I'm going to go back to the thank you slide. Any other questions, Anders?
Good question. Will VMware focus on one automation tool for the cloud, for example, VRA versus VCD?
VCD. So we can't talk roadmap in these open type sessions, but I can just talk about strategic direction, right? Strategic direction is really to focus more on the personas that are out there. So you've got cloud admins, you've got developers, you have different personas that are essentially interfacing in with the system. What we are doing is we're actually trying to align the use cases, the tasks, the responsibilities, and the workflows into those personas, so that again, as a cloud admin, I'm only seeing the things that are important to me. As a developer, I'm only seeing the things that are relevant and important to me. So directionally, that's absolutely where we're headed to be able to do that. You'll see a lot less distinction between, for example, vRealize automation and SCC manager. Those will start to become much more functions within a single product. That's about as much as I can share right now.
That's probably the best we can do under the circumstances. All right, folks. Well, it looks, just skimming through real quick, it looks like we got most of the rest of them here. So I appreciate everyone staying late, and thanks again to our audience. I know saw a lot of familiar names of folks who attended both yesterday and today. Great. We will keep these coming. Rick and Sabina, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks again for spending some extra time. And we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks much.